This bush behind me doesn't look like a bush from New Zealand, and that's because I'm in Fiji. Crossing an ocean is often super fun. It can be just like this. But sometimes it's not. When it's like this, it can really suck. The crossing from New Zealand into the South Pacific has a bit of a notorious reputation. As luck would have it, we had a weather window only 2 days after getting back in the water, and it looked like a great weather window with nice winds blowing from behind to get us into Fiji.
Finally in the water. I don't know what the fuss is about all this seasickness, but seems alright so far.
And 2 or 3 days after leaving, we realized the weather was changing. We aborted the plan to go to Minerva Reef and had the roughest passage that I've ever had in the last 2.5 years of sailing on the boat. The entire passage, 1,150 miles from New Zealand to Fiji, took us just 6 days. We were doing about an average of 8.5 knots the entire trip in 25 to 30 knots of wind, with 2 reefs in the main and 2 reefs in the jib. The sea state was consistently 3 meters, sometimes 5 meters, with about a 7-second swell period. Which, for those of you who are non-sailors, is a very bumpy, rough, and crappy swell state.
That's real boat life.
Finally coming into the reef in Fiji and getting out of that swell at around 4:30 a.m. in the morning was one of the best feelings that I've ever had. The first known attempt to leave New Zealand and sail into the South Pacific was made by Captain James Cook in 1773 on his second expedition around the world. He left New Zealand at the end of June, and it took him almost a month and a half to reach Tahiti in the South Pacific. By the time that he got there, most of the crew on the Adventure, the second ship in his 2-ship party, was suffering from scurvy, and many of them had already died. Just imagining what that crossing must have been like for those guys really puts into perspective as to just how courageous these men were who signed on to be a part of Cook's crew, and just how miserable some of the conditions that they would have had to contend with could have been, and not just for days at a time, but for weeks, even months at a time. The 6 days of bumpy and challenging sailing that we just experienced provides a small insight into what it could have been like to be one of Cook's crew on that first journey that he took from New Zealand into the South Pacific. This is our 3rd time in Fiji, and the first year that we spent sailing, we spent almost 6 months in this country exploring. In another video, I'll go over and highlight my favorite spots that we've sailed in Fiji, and the spots that if you come here on your own boat, you definitely don't want to miss. Captain Cook himself didn't really spend much time in Fiji. In fact, he only stopped at one small island here on his way to the New Hebrides, or what's known today as Vanuatu. And the reason he didn't stop here was when he was in Tonga, what he named the Friendly Islands, the villagers there told him tales of the fearsome reputation of Fijian cannibals. And for a long time, Europeans actually avoided Fiji. Even 20, 30 years later, when Captain Bligh sailed through these waters, he refused to stop here because of those tales that he had heard in Tonga when he was sailing with Captain Cook.
This whole island group is infested with cannibals. Continue to make sail.
Luckily, today, the myth of Fiji's cannibalistic nature is no longer true. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel right down there.